My name is Jessica. I'm 18 years old, and this is the story of how I spent my graduation day, sitting alone in my car, eating cold fries and trying not to cry. Everyone says graduation is supposed to be one of the happiest days of your life, and maybe for most people it is, but not for me. While my classmates were hugging their parents and taking endless photos with balloons and flowers, I sat in the farthest corner of the school parking lot. I wasn't hiding really. I just didn't want to be seen. Through the foggy windshield, I watched the gym doors swing open and families pour out, mothers dabbing tears, dads beaming with pride, younger siblings climbing onto the stage for photos. Inside my car, the silence was deafening. My cap and gown were crumpled on the seat beside me. The diploma I worked so hard for rested unopened in my lap. I had sent out invitations, one to my mom at the halfway house, one to my dad's old address, though I doubted he still lived there, and one to my aunt, who hadn't called me in over a year. I wasn't surprised when no one showed up. Disappointed, yes, but surprised, not really. So I did what I always do. I kept to myself, swallowed the ache, and tried to pretend I didn't care. But just when I thought the day couldn't feel more empty, there was a knock on my window. And that changed everything. People talk a lot about broken families, but they never tell you how quiet the world gets when no one is looking for you. Growing up, it was mostly just me. My dad left when I was 6. One day he was packing for a trip. The next, he was just gone. No goodbye, no explanation. After that, it was just my mom and me. And some days, not even her. Mom had her own battles. Pills, mostly. Then later, whatever she could get her hands on. When I was 13, I started cooking my own dinners and walking to school alone. I learned to lie to teachers about bruises and skipped meals. I also learned how to disappear in plain sight. At 15, I got a job at the grocery store down the block. It was under the table, late nights, weekends, whatever they could give me. I told myself it was just to save money. But the truth was, I needed something to do, somewhere to go that wasn't home. When my mom got arrested the second time, I moved in with my aunt. She said it was temporary, just until things settled down. But she barely looked me in the eye, like I reminded her of something she'd rather forget. I stayed in the guest room, tried not to take up space. When I turned 17, I rented a small room from an older woman who lived alone. She liked me because I paid rent on time and didn't make noise. School? School was the only place I ever felt halfway visible. I wasn't popular, but I got good grades. I joined the yearbook club not because I liked cameras, but because I liked being behind one. Watching, not watched. I knew graduation was coming. I circled the date on my calendar and read, not because I was excited, but because I needed a finish line, one last mountain to climb. So I sent out those invitations. I told myself maybe, just maybe, someone would show up. Maybe my mom would get clean in time, maybe my dad would feel a flicker of guilt. Maybe my aunt would remember what it felt like to care. But no one came. And even though I had expected it, it still hit like a punch to the chest. That's the thing about hope. It's quiet, stubborn, and painful when it dies. So when the ceremony ended, I didn't linger. I didn't want to answer questions or fake smiles. I took off my gown in the bathroom, grabbed a burger from the drive-thru, and parked my car as far from the noise as I could. I wasn't angry, just tired of pretending that I mattered to people who had long stopped showing up. That's where I was physically and emotionally when I heard the knock on my car window. When I think back to that day, everything feels a little muted, like watching a movie with the volume turned down. The ceremony itself was fine. I walked across the stage like everyone else. Principal Monroe called my name. I smiled for the camera. I shook hands. I said thank you. I took my diploma. It all looked normal. From the outside, you probably couldn't tell anything was wrong. But on the inside, I felt hollow, not sad exactly, more like disconnected. The gym was packed. People were clapping and cheering, waving signs and snapping photos. Every time a name was called, another row of family members would leap to their feet. Moms in dresses, dads with camcorders, grandparents wiping their eyes. When my name was announced, I heard a small cheer. Probably one of my teachers. I appreciated it. I really did. But when I looked out into the crowd, there was no one standing for me. No one with a camera, no one waving. I walked off the stage and straight into the hallway. I didn't wait for the reception. I didn't want cake or small talk. I just needed air. I went to the restroom, pulled off my gown, and stuffed it into my backpack. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't crying. I think the tears had already run out somewhere between age 13 and 17. Outside, the sun was too bright. I slid into my car and slammed the door, like I could somehow shut the world out with it. I pulled into a drive-thru, ordered whatever was cheapest, and parked behind the auditorium in a spot where no one would see me. That's where I sat, just me, a lukewarm burger, and a pile of crushed expectations. I stared at the dashboard. The radio played something soft, but I wasn't really listening. I opened the bag and took a bite. The fries were soggy. The burger was dry. I chewed anyway. I kept thinking about how strange it felt. After everything I'd gone through, every test, every night shift, every early morning when I forced myself out of bed just to show up, this was how it ended. Alone in a car that smelled faintly of coffee and fast food grease. This was supposed to be a big moment, a milestone, and yet it felt like just another Tuesday. I looked at my diploma, still sealed. For a second, I wondered if it was even real. If maybe someone would knock on my window and tell me they'd made a mistake. That someone like me, someone who had barely made it through, didn't really belong here. And in a way, that's exactly what happened. Because just as I took another bite of my sandwich, there was a sudden knock on my window. It startled me. I dropped the burger into my lap. When I looked up, I saw Principal Monroe standing there in full graduation regalia, his cap slightly askew, his expression unreadable. For a second, I panicked. I thought I was in trouble, like maybe parking there was against some rule. I rolled down the window halfway. "Mind if I sit with you for a minute?" he asked, not waiting for an answer before walking around to the passenger side. And that's how the second half of my graduation day began. Principal Monroe opened the door and folded himself into the passenger seat like he'd done it 100 times before. His robes bunched up awkwardly around his knees. I scrambled to move my backpack and the crumpled gown out of the way, shoving them into the back seat along with a few empty coffee cups and receipts. "Sorry," I mumbled. "It's a mess in here." He smiled, adjusting his seatbelt, even though we weren't going anywhere. "You should see the teacher's lounge," he said. "This is spotless by comparison." We sat in silence for a minute. I stared at the steering wheel, unsure why he was there, or what I was supposed to say. Then he spoke, not looking at me, just watching the empty parking lot in front of us. "I noticed you didn't stay for the reception." I shrugged. Didn't really feel like celebrating. "I understand," he said quietly. "Believe it or not, I skipped mine too." That caught my attention. I glanced over at him. "My parents were in the middle of a divorce," he continued. "They argued all the way through the ceremony. I left right after I got my diploma and went to the library. Sat between the fiction shelves for 3 hours. He chuckled softly, not bitterly, just like someone telling a story from a lifetime ago. It wasn't what I pictured either. I didn't know what to say. The man who had always seemed so composed, so in control, suddenly felt human, like someone who knew what it meant to feel invisible. He turned to face me. "Jessica, I've seen your transcripts. I know what you've been dealing with. I know how hard you've worked to be here today." I shifted in my seat, uncomfortable under the weight of his words. "It's not a big deal," I said quickly. "Lots of people have it worse." He nodded slowly. "True, but that doesn't make what you've done any less impressive." I looked away. 4 years ago," he added, "your middle school counselor reached out to me. Told me you might not make it through high school. Said your attendance was shaky. That your home life was unstable." He paused. She wasn't wrong. Statistically, students in your situation, most don't make it. But here you are. It was strange, hearing someone say it out loud. I'd buried most of that, kept it locked up and wrapped in sarcasm or silence. "I guess I just didn't want to become another statistic," I said. He smiled. "You didn't." We sat quietly for a few more moments, the late afternoon sun stretching shadows across the dashboard. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Sometimes we look so hard for the people who aren't there, we forget to notice the ones who were." That line stayed with me. Because up until that moment I hadn't realized how many people had been quietly showing up for me all along. I stared at the dashboard, processing what he'd just said. The ones who were there. It sounded simple. But when Principal Monroe started naming names, something inside me shifted. "Ms. Keller stayed late every Tuesday to help you with math," he said. "You probably thought she just liked tutoring." I nodded slowly. I remembered those sessions, how she'd bring snacks and never asked why I always looked tired. She just showed up, week after week, even when I was too exhausted to care. "Coach Ramirez let you use the gym showers when your water was shut off for 2 weeks," he continued. My cheeks flushed. I had hoped no one knew about that. "Miss Lorna in the cafeteria always made sure you got a little extra on your tray. Said you were still growing." I felt the lump in my throat swell. And then he added, "And I seem to recall someone giving you a key to the staff lounge. That week you didn't have a place to sleep." That stopped me cold. He knew. Miss Franklin, my English teacher, had quietly slipped me the key, told me to use the couch, and to be out before 6 a.m. When the early teachers arrived, I thought it was our little secret. I didn't know anyone else had noticed. "You weren't as invisible as you thought," Principal Monroe said gently. "You just didn't have the kind of support that shows up in photo albums." His words weren't dramatic. They weren't loud. But they hit harder than any applause I could have gotten in that gym. I'd been so consumed by what was missing: parents in the audience, a ride home, someone to take pictures with me, that I had completely overlooked the quiet care stitched through my daily life. A math teacher with kind eyes and unmatched patience. A cafeteria worker with a soft spot for kids who cleaned their trays. A principal who noticed things but didn't make a show of it. They had been there, just not in the way I had expected. "I guess I didn't think it counted," I admitted. "All of that. I don't know, I thought support had to come from family." "Support," he said, "comes from people who show up. Blood doesn't guarantee it, love does." I swallowed hard. "You didn't do this alone, Jessica," he said. "You carried the weight, yes, but others helped you lift it, piece by piece." There was no lecture, no inspirational speech, just truth delivered in the stillness of a car that had become my shelter that afternoon. And then, without ceremony, Principal Monroe reached into his robe and pulled out an envelope. "This was supposed to be given out at the reception," he said, handing it to me. "But since you missed it." Inside was a card. Handwritten messages covered every inch of the page. Every teacher, counselor, and even some staff members had signed it. "Jessica, you've amazed us all. Your strength inspired my whole semester. You made it, and we are so proud of you." There was also a folded check clipped to the inside. "It's a little something we put together," he explained. "We heard about your scholarship. This is just to help with books or supplies, whatever you need." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I blinked hard and looked out the window, pretending to focus on the empty lot. I wasn't used to receiving, especially not like this. For a long time, I thought being strong meant surviving alone, that needing help was weakness, that I had to earn every scrap of kindness. But maybe strength is also about accepting love, even when it comes quietly, even when it surprises you. Especially then. I held the card in my hands like it might disappear if I blinked too long. It wasn't flashy, just a plain white envelope with my name written in looping blue ink. But to me, it felt heavier than any award or certificate I'd ever received. I read every message inside slowly, like I was trying to memorize them. Some were short and sweet. Others were full of details, inside jokes from class, words of encouragement, memories I hadn't realized anyone else remembered. There were people in that building who had been watching me, rooting for me, even when I thought I was just blending into the background. And that check, I still don't know how they pulled it together. Principal Monroe said it wasn't much, but to me, it was everything. It meant I could buy my college textbooks without taking on more debt. It meant someone believed in my future enough to invest in it. It meant I wasn't as alone as I'd convinced myself I was. "I don't know what to say," I finally whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Principal Monroe replied. "Just don't waste it. Keep going." I nodded, trying to swallow past the lump in my throat. He glanced at his watch. "The reception's probably wrapping up soon. I should head back." As he opened the door, he paused and looked at me again. "Jessica, people are shaped by those who show up, not just the ones who leave." That line stuck with me. Because for years I'd been shaped by absence. by the people who didn't come, didn't call, didn't care. I'd let that define me. I wore it like armor. But maybe I'd missed something important. Maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just looking in the wrong direction. Principal Monroe stepped out of the car and adjusted his robes. Then, before closing the door, he leaned in one more time. "A few of us are grabbing dinner at Molly's Diner in an hour," he said casually. "No pressure, but you'd be welcome." Then he walked away, leaving me alone in the car, the envelope still warm in my lap. And for the first time all day, I didn't feel empty. I felt seen. And that changed everything. I sat there for a long time after Principal Monroe left. The parking lot was slowly emptying. Families loading into cars, balloons bouncing in the breeze, laughter drifting through the open windows of the gym. But inside my car, everything had gone still. I looked down at the card again. The check. My name written in so many different hands. I traced the curve of one signature with my finger, not even realizing I was smiling. Something had shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged. I didn't feel like I was pretending to be someone worth cheering for. I wasn't waiting for my family to show up anymore. Because in their own quiet, imperfect ways, others already had. The math tutor who never gave up on me. The coach who kept the gym unlocked. The English teacher who handed me a key when I had nowhere else to go. I had been so focused on who wasn't there, I never realized how many people had chosen to be. Maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe I never really had been. And maybe that made all the difference. I checked the time. It had been almost an hour since Principal Monroe left. Molly's Diner was only 10 minutes away. I stared at the address on my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen like it might burn me if I tapped the directions. I didn't know why I was so nervous. These were the same people I'd seen in hallways every day for 4 years. And yet, the idea of walking into that diner made my stomach flip. I almost didn't go. 3 times I turned the key in the ignition and hovered, foot on the brake, ready to pull away. But then I saw the graduation cap lying in the back seat. I reached back and placed it gently on the passenger seat, like I needed a reminder of what today meant. So I drove. When I pulled into the diner parking lot, I saw familiar cars. As Keller's red SUV. Coach Ramirez leaning against the hood, laughing at something Miss Lorna said. Miss Franklin was already holding the door open, waving at someone inside. My palms were sweating. I took a breath, stepped out of the car, and walked slowly toward the entrance. Principal Monroe noticed me first. He didn't smile or make a big show, he just nodded, like he expected me all along. But Ms. Keller? She lit up like Christmas morning. Jessica, you made it. Others turned. There were smiles, waves, small cheers. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to run from the attention. I stepped inside. The light was warm, the noise comforting. And as someone slid over to make space for me in the booth, I realized something quietly powerful. This wasn't just a group of teachers. This was my people. My chosen family. And I belonged here. That night, I didn't post any pictures on social media. There were no family portraits in front of balloons, no long captions about overcoming the odds. But in a quiet booth at Molly's Diner, over greasy fries and laughter that felt warmer than anything I'd heard all day, I realized something I should have known a long time ago. Family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes family is the math teacher who stays late, the cafeteria worker who slips you an extra cookie, the principal who notices when you disappear, the people who choose you day after day, even when they have no obligation to. For so long, I believed my worth was tied to the ones who left. I carried their absence like proof that something was wrong with me. But sitting there, surrounded by people who had seen me at my worst and still pulled up a seat for me at the table, I knew better. I had survived. More than that, I had been seen, supported, cared for in quiet ways that mattered more than any applause. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever felt invisible, forgotten, or unworthy, please hear me. You are not alone. And maybe today, or tomorrow, someone will knock on your window too. When they do, let them in. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it. Like, comment, Or send it to someone who might need to hear it. Because we all deserve to feel seen. Even just for one night. Especially then,